Most of the suffering in your life does not come from what happens to you. It comes from what you are trying to do about what happens to you. From the moment you wake up, there is a quiet tension inside you, a feeling that something must be managed, adjusted, fixed, or controlled. You look at your thoughts and try to organize them. You look at your future and try to secure it. You look at your emotions and try to calm them down. And beneath all of this effort is a simple belief you were taught very early in life, that life is something you are supposed to take charge of. But notice how strange that idea really is. You did not decide to be born. You did not design your body. You did not choose the language that formed your first thoughts, or the world that shaped your personality. Your heart beats without your permission. Your lungs breathe without instruction. Even your thoughts appear before you ask them to. And yet, somehow, you believe you are meant to control the whole thing. This belief creates a quiet war inside the mind, a constant struggle between what is happening and what you think should be happening, between who you are and who you believe you must become, and the more you try to win this war, the more exhausted you feel. You may have noticed this. The harder you try to relax, the more tense you become. The harder you try to be confident, the more self-conscious you feel. The harder you try to control your thoughts, the louder they seem to get. This is not a failure of willpower, it is a misunderstanding of how life works. You see, control is useful for machines. It is useful for systems that are separate from us. But life is not a machine you operate from the outside. You are not a manager standing above existence, pulling levers and issuing commands. You are something life is doing, the same way a wave is something the ocean is doing. And a wave does not try to control the ocean. Imagine a wave rising up and saying, "I must stay tall forever. I must not crash. I must hold my shape." That wave would experience terror the moment it realized what it really is, because its very nature is movement, rise and fall, form and dissolve. You are not separate from the process of life. You are an expression of it. And the moment you try to dominate it, you create resistance against yourself. Most people live as if they are in a constant emergency, as if the present moment is never quite acceptable, never quite safe. There is always something coming that must be prepared for, prevented, or controlled, and so the mind is never here. It is always leaning forward, gripping the future with white knuckles. But the future is not something you can hold. When you try to control life, what you are really trying to control is uncertainty. You want guarantees. You want assurance that things will turn out the way you prefer. You want to know that your efforts will be rewarded, that your pain will have meaning, that your fears will not come true. And yet, life offers no such guarantees. This does not mean life is cruel. It means life is alive. A river does not apologize for changing its course. The weather does not ask permission before it storms. And you, as a living process, were never meant to be predictable, stable, or permanently secure. The tragedy is that we are taught to fear this truth. We are taught that not being in control is dangerous, irresponsible, or weak. So we spend our lives building mental cages and calling them safety. But notice something important. Even when you think you are in control, anxiety remains. Even when plans are made, fear still visits. Even when success is achieved, insecurity returns. Because control was never the solution. Trying to control life is like trying to smooth the surface of water with your hand. The more effort you use, the more ripples you create. But if you simply remove your hand, the water settles on its own. The mind works the same way. When you stop trying to force your thoughts into silence, they begin to slow down naturally. When you stop demanding happiness, moments of peace appear without effort. When you stop insisting that life makes sense, it begins to feel meaningful. This does not mean you become passive or careless. It means you stop confusing control with intelligence. There is a deep intelligence already moving through you, an intelligence that knows how to heal cuts, how to grow hair, how to digest food, how to adapt after loss. You did not program this intelligence, you are it. And the strange irony is this: the more you trust this process, the more skillfully you respond to life. Not by force, but by sensitivity. Not by domination, but by participation. Let go does not mean give up. It means stop gripping what was never yours to hold. And perhaps the most frightening realization is this: the self you are trying so hard to control everything with is itself part of the same uncontrollable process. The controller is not outside the system, it is inside it. Which raises a profound question. If you cannot fully control your thoughts, your emotions, your body, or the events of your life, then who exactly is the one who believes they should? Sit with that question, not to answer it, but to feel it. Because in that space of not knowing, something begins to loosen, the struggle softens, and for the first time life is no longer something you are fighting. It is something you are listening to. When you begin to listen to life instead of trying to command it, you may feel a strange discomfort at first, almost like standing without armor, because control was never just a strategy. It was an identity. It was the way you told yourself, I am safe because I am managing everything. And when that illusion loosens, the mind panics. It asks, if I am not in control, then what am I? This fear is natural. The mind has been trained to believe that letting go is the same as falling apart, that without constant effort, everything will collapse. But notice how life behaves when you are not interfering with it. Notice how you breathe when you are asleep. Notice how your body knows exactly what to do without your supervision. The truth is not that control keeps things together. The truth is that life holds itself together. Your attempt to control is often a response to past pain. Somewhere along the way, something happened that made you feel powerless. Maybe you were hurt, misunderstood, abandoned, or overwhelmed, and the mind learned a lesson: never let this happen again. So it began watching everything closely, anticipating danger, planning every move, rehearsing outcomes before they arrive. This is not weakness. It is intelligence trying to protect itself. But protection can slowly turn into imprisonment. When the mind is always bracing for impact, it cannot rest, it cannot trust, it cannot open. And over time, this constant vigilance becomes the very source of anxiety it was meant to prevent. You are not anxious because life is out of control. You are anxious because you are trying to control something that cannot be controlled. Think about how often you replay conversations in your head, how often you imagine what you should have said, what you should say next time, how others might perceive you. This is the mind trying to edit reality after it has already happened, trying to rewrite the past or preempt the future. But life only exists here. Control always points somewhere else. It points to a moment that is not now, and in doing so, it quietly steals your presence. Presence does not need control. Presence is already complete. When you are fully present, you respond naturally. You do not need to calculate every move, because you are not operating from fear. You are operating from awareness. And awareness is far more precise than force. The mind, however, distrusts this. It wants rules. It wants certainty. It wants guarantees. So it says, just in case, let me hold everything tightly. But what it does not realize is that tightness blocks sensitivity. A clenched fist cannot feel. And so, in trying to secure life, you lose contact with it. This is why moments of deep peace often arrive when you stop trying, when you are not seeking improvement, when you are not fixing yourself, when you are not chasing meaning. Maybe you are watching the sky. Maybe you are walking without destination. Maybe you are simply breathing, and suddenly, without effort, everything feels okay. Not perfect, not permanent, but okay. This okayness does not come from control. It comes from alignment, from no longer resisting what is. Resistance is exhausting. Acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity. It is seeing clearly what is happening without adding a layer of mental struggle on top of it. Life already includes pain. Control adds suffering. When something painful happens, the pain is immediate and real. But the suffering comes from the story that follows: this should not have happened. This means something is wrong with me. This must never happen again. And so the mind tightens its grip, promising vigilance. But no amount of vigilance can make life predictable. What it can do is make you miss it. There is a deep misunderstanding at the center of control. The belief that if you just think enough, plan enough, and manage enough, you will finally arrive at a place where nothing threatens you. But such a place does not exist. And strangely enough, once you see that clearly, something relaxes, because you no longer demand the impossible from yourself. You stop trying to be the architect of the universe. You begin to live more like a dancer than a builder, responding to rhythm, adjusting to movement, trusting the flow rather than forcing a structure. A dancer does not control the music. They move with it. And life, like music, is not meant to be mastered. It is meant to be experienced. As this understanding deepens, another question quietly arises. If control has been the source of so much tension, what happens if you stop? Not completely, not recklessly, but gently, moment by moment, thought by thought. What happens when you allow life to surprise you again? Hold that curiosity. Let it stay open, because in the next movement of this reflection, we begin to explore what lies beneath the need for control itself, and why the mind clings to it so desperately. When you begin to look closely at the need for control, you may discover something unexpected. Beneath it is not strength, but fear. Not confidence, but uncertainty. The mind clings to control not because it works, but because it feels familiar. It is the known struggle compared to the unknown freedom. The mind says, if I don't manage everything, something terrible might happen. But notice how vague that fear is. Something, sometime, somewhere in the future. Control thrives on imagination, not reality. Right now, in this exact moment, most of the disasters you fear are not happening. Your body is supported. Your breath is moving. The world has not collapsed. And yet the mind behaves as if danger is imminent. This is because it is not responding to life as it is, but to life as it imagines it might be. And imagination, when driven by fear, becomes a prison. You start living in anticipation instead of experience. You rehearse problems before they arrive. You prepare for conversations that may never happen. You grieve futures that do not yet exist. And all of this effort feels productive, but it quietly drains your energy. This is why overthinking feels heavy. It is not thinking, it is bracing. There is a profound difference between intelligence and anxiety. Intelligence responds when something is actually happening. Anxiety responds to shadows. When a real challenge appears, you are far more capable than you believe. You adapt, you adjust, you respond. Life moves through you with surprising clarity. But when you try to live every possible future in advance, you collapse under the weight of imagined responsibility. You were not designed to carry time all at once. The present moment is not asking you to solve your entire life. It is only asking you to be here. Control convinces you that you must become someone else before you are allowed to rest. That peace is a reward for perfection. That ease must be earned through struggle. But this belief keeps peace permanently out of reach. Because the one who is struggling is also the one setting the conditions. Notice how often the mind says, "Once this is fixed, then I'll relax." But once that thing is fixed, another condition appears. This is not a coincidence. This is the nature of control. It always moves the finish line. Life, however, does not wait for you to be ready. It keeps happening. It keeps unfolding. And the more you resist it, the more disconnected you feel from yourself. This disconnection often feels like emptiness, like something is missing. And so you try harder, you set more goals, you create more rules, you build a stronger identity. But none of these things touch the real issue. The issue is not that you are failing at control. The issue is that you are trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled from the outside. You are not standing apart from life, steering it. You are inside it, moving with it, whether you realize it or not. The illusion of control creates the illusion of separation, a sense that I am here and life is out there, and it is my job to manage the relationship between the two. But there is no separation. The moment you truly see this, not as an idea but as a feeling, something begins to dissolve. The pressure to perform existence correctly starts to fade. You realize you are not failing at life. You are life, happening. And life does not need to justify itself. This realization does not make you careless. It makes you honest. Honest about your limits. Honest about uncertainty. Honest about the fact that you were never meant to have total control. And strangely, in admitting this, you feel lighter. Because you no longer have to pretend to be in charge of the universe. You can simply participate. And participation is effortless compared to domination. As this understanding settles, another layer begins to reveal itself. If you are not meant to control life, then what is your role in it? How do you live without collapsing into chaos or passivity? That is where we turn next. When the idea of control begins to loosen, the mind often worries that the alternative must be chaos. It imagines that without strict management, life will fall apart, motivation will disappear, and nothing meaningful will be accomplished. This fear comes from confusing control with responsibility. They are not the same. Responsibility is responsiveness. Responsibility listens first. Control reacts immediately. Responsibility moves with reality. Control tries to bend reality into a preferred shape. You do not need control to live wisely. You need awareness. Awareness notices what is actually happening instead of what should be happening. It notices tension as tension, fear as fear, desire as desire, and in this noticing something remarkable occurs. The mind no longer has to fix everything because it understands what is going on. Most mistakes are not caused by lack of control. They are caused by lack of presence. When you are present, you naturally respond in ways that make sense. You stop wasting energy on imaginary problems. You stop arguing with reality. You stop trying to become someone else before you allow yourself to live. Control always demands improvement before acceptance. Awareness accepts first, and improvement follows naturally. This is why trying to force change rarely works. You cannot bully yourself into peace. You cannot threaten yourself into confidence. You cannot shame yourself into becoming whole. Wholeness does not come from domination. It comes from integration. Every part of you that you try to suppress will return in another form. Every emotion you try to control will find a way to express itself. Life does not like being managed. It likes being understood. And understanding does not mean agreement. It means seeing clearly. When sadness appears, control says, "Get rid of this." Awareness says, "This is sadness." When fear appears, control says, "This must stop." Awareness says, "This is fear." And in that simple recognition, the emotion is no longer fighting for attention. Most emotional pain is amplified because it is resisted. Think of how children react when they are told not to feel something. The feeling grows louder. The same thing happens inside you. When you tell yourself you should not feel anxious, anxiousness multiplies. When you tell yourself you must be calm, tension increases. Life responds poorly to commands, but beautifully to permission. Permission does not mean indulgence. It means allowing what is already here to exist without judgment. When you stop controlling your inner world, you begin to notice something surprising. Thoughts lose their authority. Emotions pass more quickly. The sense of a solid, struggling self begins to soften. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which they appear. And space does not need control. Space allows. This is where true freedom begins to emerge. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom within it. Freedom from the constant inner commentary that says everything must be different for you to be okay. Life does not ask you to solve it. It asks you to meet it. When you meet life instead of managing it, your actions become simpler, more direct, less anxious. You stop overcomplicating decisions. You stop exhausting yourself with endless mental rehearsals. And interestingly, you become more effective. Because effectiveness comes from clarity, not control. A person who trusts the moment acts with precision. A person who fears the moment hesitates endlessly. This trust does not come from belief. It comes from experience, from noticing again and again that you survive uncertainty, that you adapt, that you are far more resilient than the controlling mind would have you believe. And as this trust grows, something else begins to dissolve. The need to constantly define yourself, to label yourself, to defend an identity. Control is deeply tied to identity, to the idea that this is who I am and I must protect it. But identity is another moving process, another story, another pattern arising in awareness. You are not a fixed thing that needs constant maintenance. You are a living movement, and movement cannot be controlled without being destroyed. As this realization deepens, a quieter question arises. If you are not here to control life, and not here to defend a rigid identity, then what is left? What does it feel like to live without gripping? That is where we turn next. When the grip begins to loosen, life does not disappear. In fact, it becomes more vivid. Colors feel sharper, sounds feel closer, moments feel more real. This is because control dulls experience. It keeps you one step removed, always watching, always judging, always adjusting. Letting go brings you back into direct contact with living. At first, this can feel unsettling. Without constant mental supervision, there is a sense of openness, and openness feels risky to a mind trained to protect itself. But notice how this openness is also relief. The relief of not having to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You begin to see that surrender is not collapse, it is cooperation. Life is not something happening to you, it is something happening as you. When you truly feel this, effort changes quality. You still act, you still choose, you still plan when planning is useful, but the tension behind those actions disappears. You are no longer trying to outsmart existence. You are moving with it. This is why people often say their best work happens when they stop forcing it, when they are absorbed, when time seems to disappear. In those moments there is action without a controller, movement without resistance. The mind calls this losing control. Life calls it flow. Flow cannot be commanded. The moment you try to recreate it, it vanishes. It arrives only when you are present enough to let it. And this reveals something important. The deepest intelligence in you does not speak in words. It speaks in timing, in rhythm, in feeling, and control. With all its noise, drowns it out. When you stop trying to dominate your experience, you begin to sense when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to hold on and when to release. This sensitivity is not learned, it is uncovered. It was always there, beneath the effort. The struggle to control is also the struggle to be certain, to know who you are, where you are going, and what everything means. But life does not unfold according to fixed meanings. Meaning is something you discover along the way, not something you secure in advance. When you accept this, you stop demanding clarity before movement. You move first, and clarity follows. This changes your relationship with fear. Fear no longer signals danger. It signals aliveness. It tells you that you are standing at the edge of the known, and instead of retreating into control, you can meet fear with curiosity. Curiosity is gentle. Control is harsh. Curiosity says, let's see what happens. Control says, this must not happen. One opens doors, the other closes them. As control softens, you may notice another shift. Compassion arises naturally, not as a moral rule, but as recognition. You see that others are also trying to manage uncertainty, also gripping, also afraid of letting go. And so judgment fades. You stop seeing people as obstacles and start seeing them as processes, just like you, unfinished, uncertain, learning as they go. This does not make you naive. It makes you human. You also become kinder to yourself. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes. You stop turning every mistake into a verdict on your identity. Life becomes less about proving and more about experiencing. And perhaps the most beautiful change is this. You start trusting silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence beneath thought. The quiet space where you do not need to explain yourself to yourself. In that silence, you are already enough. No control required. As we move closer to the end of this reflection, there is one final misunderstanding that must dissolve. The belief that letting go means losing yourself. In the next movement, we will look directly at that fear and discover what remains when control finally falls away. One of the last defenses of control is the fear of disappearance. The fear that if you stop managing, defining, and directing yourself, there will be nothing left, that you will dissolve into passivity, confusion, or emptiness. This fear feels deep because it touches the very idea of who you think you are. But look closely at this fear. What exactly is it afraid of losing? Most of what you call yourself is a collection of habits, memories, roles, and expectations. A story repeated so often it feels solid. Control works hard to keep this story consistent. It says, this is who I am and I must protect it. But the story is always changing, whether you allow it or not. You are not losing yourself by letting go. You are losing the effort of pretending to be fixed. Notice how different you are in different situations. With friends, with family, alone, in silence, in fear, in joy. Which one is the real you? Control tries to choose one and hold on to it. Life expresses all of them naturally. When you stop controlling, you do not become empty. You become fluid, and fluid things are alive. The fear of emptiness comes from misunderstanding silence. Silence is not absence. It is space, and space is what allows anything to appear at all. Without space, there would be no thought, no feeling, no experience. The mind fears silence because it cannot dominate it. Yet silence has been holding you your entire life. Between breaths, between thoughts, between moments. It has always been there, unnoticed, steady, calm. When you stop trying to control your inner world, you begin to sense this background presence, a quiet awareness that is not struggling, not rushing, not afraid. It does not need improvement. It does not need reassurance. It simply is. This awareness is not something you create. It is something you recognize. And the more you rest in it, the more you realize that the sense of "I must control" was never coming from this deeper place. It was coming from tension, from contraction, from fear of uncertainty. When uncertainty is no longer treated as an enemy, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting the unknown and start living inside it. Because life has always been unknown, control was an attempt to turn mystery into certainty. But mystery is not a problem to solve. It is the nature of existence. When you accept mystery, you stop asking life to explain itself before you trust it. You trust first. This trust does not make you careless. It makes you attentive. You listen more closely. You respond more honestly. You stop forcing answers and start noticing signals. And perhaps the most liberating realization is this: you were never meant to arrive at a final version of yourself. There is no completed identity waiting at the end of effort. There is only movement, and movement does not need control. It needs balance. It needs awareness. It needs presence. When you stop trying to pin yourself down, you discover freedom not as an idea, but as a feeling, a lightness, a sense of being carried rather than dragged. Life no longer feels like a test you must pass. It feels like a conversation you are part of, and you do not need to control a conversation to participate in it. As we come to the final part of this reflection, everything begins to simplify, not because you have figured life out, but because you have stopped demanding that it makes sense on your terms. What remains is quiet confidence, not the confidence of certainty, but the confidence of trust. And that trust is what we rest in next. At the end of all this effort to control, to understand, to secure, something very simple remains. You are here, breathing, aware, alive, and nothing more is required. Life does not ask you to conquer it. It asks you to participate. When you stop trying to dominate the moment meets you fully. You are no longer standing outside your own experience, judging it, correcting it, demanding more from it. You are inside it, moving with it, trusting its rhythm. This trust is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not need validation. It feels like standing on solid ground without needing to look down. You realize that you never needed to control your life to live it well. You needed to stop fighting it. The mind relaxes when it sees this clearly. It no longer has to carry the impossible responsibility of managing the universe. It can return to what it does best: responding, creating, learning, adapting. And when the mind rests, the heart opens. You become more patient, not because you are trying to be, but because there is nothing to rush against. You become more courageous, not because fear disappears, but because fear no longer controls your choices. You become more peaceful, not because life becomes gentle, but because you stop demanding that it be. This is the freedom hidden inside letting go, not a dramatic escape, not a final answer, just the ease of not gripping what was never yours to hold. You stop asking, "How do I control my life?" And the question quietly changes to, how do I meet this moment? And that question always has an answer. Sometimes the answer is action. Sometimes it is stillness. Sometimes it is acceptance. Sometimes it is letting something end. You trust yourself enough to listen. Life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like a movement to feel. You notice that even uncertainty has its own beauty, that not knowing keeps you awake, curious, alive. You were never meant to stand outside the river and command it where to flow. You were meant to be the river, moving, changing, responding, alive. And when you finally stop trying to control the current, you discover that it has been carrying you all along. There is nowhere you need to arrive, nothing you need to prove, nothing you need to fix before you are allowed to rest. This moment is enough, and so are you.